The afternoon sun blazed mercilessly over downtown Los Angeles, turning the concrete into a furnace that radiated heat in shimmering waves. Maya Rodriguez gripped her crutches tighter as she navigated the crowded sidewalk, her left leg throbbing with each careful step. The brace around her knee, a constant reminder of the car accident that had changed her life 6 months ago, caught the light as she moved. At 17, she had learned to carry herself with dignity despite the stares and whispered comments that followed her everywhere. Her destination was simple: the small medical supply store 3 blocks from her apartment. Her physical therapist had recommended new grip pads for her crutches, and Maya was determined to make the journey alone. Independence had become her mission, even when every step felt like a small battle against gravity and pain. The sidewalk was unusually busy for a Tuesday afternoon. Construction workers were taking their lunch break. Office employees rushed between meetings, and tourists wandered with cameras and confused expressions. Maya found herself caught in the flow of pedestrian traffic, moving slower than everyone else, but refusing to step aside. She had as much right to the sidewalk as anyone else. That's when she first noticed him. A large man in his 40s, wearing a stained tank top that barely contained his beer belly, was walking directly toward her. His face was flushed red from the heat, and something else, anger that seemed to radiate from his pores like sweat. Behind him walked 2 companions, equally rough-looking, their voices loud and crude as they discussed their afternoon drinking plans. Maya tried to move to the right to give them space, but her crutch caught on a crack in the sidewalk. She stumbled slightly, her balance wavering for a terrifying moment before she steadied herself. The brief delay put her directly in the path of the approaching men. "Watch where you're going, Gimp," the large man snarled, his breath reeking of alcohol and cigarettes. His friends laughed, the sound harsh and mocking in the afternoon air. Maya's cheeks burned with shame and anger, but she kept walking. She had learned to ignore such comments, to let them roll off her like water. But today felt different. Today, something in his voice carried a violence that made her skin crawl. "I said watch it," the man repeated, louder this time. Other pedestrians began to notice, their conversations faltering as they sensed the brewing confrontation. Some quickened their pace to avoid getting involved, while others slowed down with the morbid curiosity that draws people to accidents. Maya stopped and looked up at him. He was even bigger up close, his arms thick with muscle despite the layer of fat around his middle. His eyes were bloodshot and mean, the kind of eyes that enjoyed causing pain. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the fear crawling up her spine. "I didn't mean to get in your way." The apology should have ended it. In a normal world, with normal people, it would have been enough. But this man was looking for a fight, and Maya's disability made her an easy target. His face twisted into an ugly smile as he looked down at her crutches. "Sorry doesn't fix stupid," he said, his voice carrying across the sidewalk. "Maybe if you stayed home where you belong, normal people wouldn't have to deal with you hopping around like a wounded bird." The words hit Maya like physical blows. She had heard variations of this cruelty before, but never delivered with such venom, never in front of so many witnesses who stood frozen in uncomfortable silence. Her hands tightened on her crutches until her knuckles went white. Meanwhile, just 50 feet away, 2 men were exiting a high-end gym, their workout complete. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson wiped sweat from his forehead with a towel, his massive frame filling out a simple gray t-shirt. Beside him, John Cena adjusted his baseball cap, both men looking forward to their usual post-workout meal at their favorite restaurant. They had been friends for years, their bond forged through countless battles in the wrestling ring and strengthened by their shared commitment to using their fame for good. Both men were known for their work with children's charities, their visits to hospitals, and their willingness to stand up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. As they walked down the sidewalk, their conversation about weekend plans was interrupted by raised voices ahead. The crowd had thickened around something, and both men could sense the tension in the air like electricity before a storm. "What's going on over there?" John asked, his protective instincts already activating. Dwayne squinted through the crowd, his height giving him a better view than most. What he saw made his jaw clench with anger. A young girl on crutches was being confronted by 3 large men, and the situation was clearly escalating beyond mere words. They couldn't see Maya's face yet, couldn't hear the exact words being spoken, but they could read the body language clearly enough. The girl was trying to back away, but the men were following her, their postures aggressive and threatening. "We need to get closer," Dwayne said, his voice carrying the authority that had made him a natural leader both in and out of the ring. John nodded, and together they began pushing through the crowd, their celebrity status forgotten in the face of what was clearly becoming a dangerous situation. Neither man could have predicted that they were about to witness an act of cruelty so shocking that it would haunt them for years to come, or that their intervention would create a moment that would be talked about around the world. As they drew closer, they could finally hear the man's words, each one more vicious than the last. Maya was trapped now, her back against a storefront window, nowhere to run even if her legs would carry her. The crowd pressed in around them, some filming with their phones, others looking away in shame at their own inaction. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test everything these 5 people believed about courage, justice, and the power of standing up for what's right. Maya's back pressed against the cool glass of the storefront window, her escape route cut off by the growing crowd of onlookers. The 3 men had formed a semicircle around her, their body language unmistakably predatory. The leader, his face now purple with rage and alcohol, seemed to feed off the attention they were drawing. "You know what your problem is?" he continued, his voice growing louder and more slurred with each word. "You think people owe you something just because you're broken. Well, let me tell you something, princess. The world doesn't owe cripples anything." His companions laughed and nodded, emboldened by their leader's cruelty. One of them, a thin man with yellowed teeth and tattoos covering his arms, stepped closer. "Yeah, maybe you should get some wheels instead of those sticks. At least then you could keep up with normal people." Maya felt tears threatening to spill from her eyes, but she refused to give them the satisfaction. She had cried enough in the months after her accident, cried for her lost mobility, for the dancing career that would never be, for the simple pleasure of running that she would never feel again. But she had promised herself she would never cry in public, never let strangers see her break. "Please," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just want to go home." The crowd around them had grown to nearly 30 people, their phones held high to capture every moment of Maya's humiliation. Some looked uncomfortable, shifting their weight from foot to foot and avoiding eye contact. Others wore expressions of sick fascination, as if they were watching a particularly brutal reality TV show. Through the sea of faces, Maya caught sight of 2 figures pushing their way forward. Even in her distressed state, she recognized them immediately. Their faces were plastered on billboards and movie posters throughout the city. But they weren't moving like celebrities trying to avoid attention. They moved with purpose, their expressions dark with growing anger. The drunk man noticed a shift in the crowd's attention and followed their gaze. When he saw the Rock and John Cena approaching, his eyes lit up with malicious glee. "Well, well," he said, his voice carrying across the silent crowd. "Looks like we got ourselves some famous witnesses. Hey there, movie stars. Come to watch the freak show." Dwayne and John continued their approach, their faces masks of barely controlled fury. They had heard every word, seen every moment of this girl's torment, and both men were struggling to maintain their composure. They had dealt with bullies their entire careers, but this level of cruelty towards someone so vulnerable was testing their limits. "That's enough," John said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Leave her alone." The drunk man's smile widened. "Oh, look at this. Captain America thinks he's going to save the day." He turned back to Maya, his attention focused on her with renewed intensity. "Your bodyguards arrived just in time, Gimp. Too bad they can't fix what's wrong with you." Maya's world seemed to slow down as she watched the man's foot draw back. She saw the calculation in his eyes, the moment when cruelty transformed into violence. She tried to shift her weight, to move her crutch out of the way, but her reaction was too slow, her balance too precarious. The kick connected with her left crutch with a sickening crack that echoed off the surrounding buildings. The carefully balanced support that had been holding her upright was gone in an instant, and Maya felt herself falling as if in slow motion. Her arms windmilled desperately, trying to catch herself, but there was nothing to grab onto. She hit the concrete sidewalk hard, her injured leg twisting beneath her in a way that sent lightning bolts of agony through her entire body. Her cry of pain cut through the afternoon air like a knife, causing several people in the crowd to gasp and cover their mouths in horror. The broken crutch clattered across the sidewalk, its rubber tip rolling into the street. Maya lay sprawled on the hot concrete, her dignity stripped away along with her mobility. Tears finally came, not from the physical pain, though that was excruciating, but from the complete helplessness of her situation. The drunk man stood over her, his chest puffed out with pride at what he had accomplished. "That's where you belong," he said, his words dripping with satisfaction, on the ground with the rest of the trash. But his moment of triumph was short-lived. The crowd, which had been silent with shock, began to murmur with anger. Even those who had been filming lowered their phones, seemingly ashamed of their earlier voyeurism. The attack had crossed a line that even passive observers couldn't ignore. More importantly, The Rock and John Cena had seen enough. What happened next would be talked about for years to come, shared millions of times across social media, and remembered as one of the most powerful examples of celebrities using their platform for justice. But in that moment, as Maya lay crying on the sidewalk and her attacker stood gloating over her, all that mattered was that two decent human beings had witnessed an unforgivable act of cruelty and decided to do something about it. The drunk man was about to learn that there are consequences for hurting innocent people, especially when those consequences come in the form of two of the strongest men in the world who have dedicated their lives to protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Maya, still sprawled on the concrete, looked up through her tears to see The Rock and John Cena stepping forward, their faces transformed by righteous anger. For the first time since the confrontation began, she felt a flicker of hope. Help had arrived, and these men looked like they meant business. The crowd seemed to sense the shift in power as well. Phones began recording again, but this time to capture justice rather than cruelty. The afternoon sun continued to beat down mercilessly, but the heat that mattered now was the burning anger in the eyes of two men who had seen enough. The moment Maya's body hit the concrete, something fundamental shifted in the air around them. The casual cruelty of the drunk man's actions had crossed a line that transformed the situation from harassment into assault. The crowd's uncomfortable murmurs turned into angry voices, and several people began shouting at the attacker. But none of that registered with Dwayne Johnson and John Cena. Their world had narrowed to a single focus, the piece of human garbage standing over an injured teenage girl, laughing at her pain. The Rock moved first, his massive frame covering the distance between himself and Maya's attacker in 3 powerful strides. The drunk man, still basking in his perceived victory, didn't see the danger until it was too late to run. Dwayne's hand shot out and gripped the man's shirt front, lifting him slightly off his feet with seemingly no effort. The man's eyes went wide with sudden fear as he found himself face to face with 260 pounds of pure muscle and barely controlled rage. "You think that was funny?" The Rock's voice was low and dangerous, each word carefully measured and sharp as broken glass. "You think hurting a kid makes you tough?" The drunk man tried to pull away, but it was like trying to escape from a vice. Hey, calm down there, superstar," he stammered, his earlier bravado evaporating like steam. "It was just a joke. The girl's fine." John Cena moved to Maya's side, kneeling on the hot concrete, without regard for his expensive workout clothes. "Are you hurt?" he asked gently, his voice completely different from the tone he used in the ring. This was the voice he reserved for sick children in hospitals and frightened fans. Maya tried to sit up, wincing as pain shot through her leg. "My crutch," she whispered, looking at the broken pieces scattered across the sidewalk. I can't get up without it." John's jaw clenched as he looked at the destroyed mobility aid, then back at the man still trapped in the Rock's grip. The crutch wasn't just a piece of equipment. It represented Maya's independence, her dignity, her ability to navigate the world on her own terms. And this monster had taken that away from her for his own twisted amusement. "A joke," The Rock repeated, his voice rising with each word. "You call kicking a disabled girl's crutch a joke?" The crowd pressed closer, their phones capturing every moment of the confrontation. But this wasn't entertainment anymore. This was justice. The drunk man's two companions, who had been laughing and encouraging their friend moments before, now looked like they wanted to disappear. They backed away slowly, trying to distance themselves from their leader as they realized the situation had spiraled completely out of their control. "Look, we don't want any trouble," one of them said, his voice high with panic. "We were just having some fun. Nobody got hurt." John Cena stood up slowly, his eyes never leaving the speaker's face. "Nobody got hurt?" he repeated, his voice incredulous. "She's sitting on the ground because you destroyed her crutch. In what world is that not hurt?" The Rock's grip on the main attacker tightened slightly. "You know what I think," he said, his voice carrying across the silent crowd. "I think you're a coward who picks on people who can't fight back. I think you're the kind of man who makes the world a worse place just by being in it." The drunk man tried to laugh it off, but the sound came out as more of a wheeze. "Come on, man. You're being dramatic. It's just some crippled girl. There's plenty more where she came from." The words had barely left his mouth when John Cena moved. His hand shot out and grabbed the man's arm, applying pressure to a nerve point he had learned during his wrestling training. The man yelped in pain and surprise, his knees buckling as his arm went partially numb. "That crippled girl has a name," John said, his voice deadly quiet. "She's a human being with feelings, dreams, and more courage in her little finger than you have in your entire body. And you're going to apologize to her." The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. Some had stopped recording, too caught up in the moment to remember their phones. Others continued filming, knowing they were witnessing something important, something that would be shared around the world before the day was over. "Apologize," the man gasped, still struggling against the joint lock. "To her? You've got to be kidding me." The Rock and John Cena exchanged a look that communicated volumes. They had both dedicated their careers to entertaining people, to putting smiles on faces, and inspiring others to overcome obstacles. But they had also both faced real adversity, real challenges that had tested their character. And they recognized that same fighting spirit in the teenage girl sitting on the concrete behind them. "We're not kidding," The Rock said, his voice carrying the finality of a judge's sentence. "You're going to help her up, you're going to pay for a new crutch, and you're going to apologize for being the worst kind of human being." The drunk man looked around desperately, seeking support from his friends or sympathy from the crowd. But his companions had disappeared completely, melting away into the sea of faces, and the crowd was looking at him with expressions of disgust and contempt. "This is assault," he tried weakly. "I could sue you both for this." John Cena almost smiled at that. "Assault? You mean like kicking a disabled girl's mobility aid? Like causing her to fall and injure herself? That kind of assault?" The man's face went pale as he realized the legal implications of what he had done. In his drunken rage, he had committed a crime in front of dozens of witnesses, all of whom had it recorded on their phones. His little act of cruelty was about to cost him far more than he had ever imagined. Maya, still sitting on the ground, but now surrounded by several concerned bystanders who were checking on her condition, looked up at her unlikely defenders. She had grown up watching these men on television, cheering for them in wrestling matches and movies. But seeing them now, using their fame and strength to defend a stranger, she realized she was witnessing something truly extraordinary. The afternoon sun continued to beat down on the crowd, but the heat of the moment was about to reach its peak. Justice was being served on a sidewalk in Los Angeles, delivered by two men who understood that true strength means protecting those who cannot protect themselves. The drunk man's breathing became labored as the reality of his situation finally penetrated his alcohol-clouded judgment. Surrounded by an angry crowd, restrained by two of the most physically powerful men in entertainment, and caught on camera assaulting a disabled teenager, he was beginning to understand that his moment of cruel entertainment was about to become the worst day of his life. "Let me go," he wheezed, still trying to maintain some semblance of authority despite his obvious disadvantage. "You can't do this to me. I know my rights." The Rock's laugh was devoid of any humor. "Your rights? What about her rights? What about her right to walk down a public sidewalk without being attacked by a drunk coward? Several people in the crowd began calling out their agreement. "Make him apologize," shouted a woman holding her young daughter's hand. "That poor girl." Others joined in, their voices creating a chorus of outrage that seemed to echo off the surrounding buildings. John Cena knelt down beside Maya again, his voice gentle despite the fury burning in his eyes. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Maya," she whispered, wiping tears from her cheeks with the back of her hand. "Maya Rodriguez." "Maya," John repeated, turning the name into something powerful and important. Maya was trying to go about her day, just like everyone else here. She wasn't bothering anyone, wasn't causing any trouble. She was just trying to live her life with dignity despite the challenges she faces every single day. He stood up and faced the attacker, his voice rising so everyone could hear. "But you decided she didn't deserve that dignity. You decided that her disability made her fair game for your sick entertainment. You decided to take away the tools she needs to walk, to move, to be independent." The man tried to pull away again, but the Rock's grip was unbreakable. "Look, I was drunk, okay? I made a mistake. Can't we just forget about this?" "Forget?" The Rock's voice carried across the crowd like thunder. "You want us to forget that you physically assaulted a teenager with a disability? You want Maya to forget the humiliation of being knocked down in front of all these people? You want everyone here to forget what kind of person you really are?" Maya struggled to stand using her remaining crutch, but several bystanders rushed to help her, offering their arms for support. An older gentleman, well-dressed and clearly shaken by what he had witnessed, stepped forward. "I'm Dr. Peterson," he announced to the crowd. "I specialize in orthopedic medicine. This young lady needs to be examined. That fall could have caused serious damage to her existing injury." The drunk man's face went even paler as the medical implications of his actions became clear. Causing further injury to someone who was already disabled could result in serious criminal charges, not to mention civil liability that could cost him everything he owned. I didn't mean for her to get hurt," he stammered, his earlier aggression completely gone. "It was just supposed to be funny." John Cena's voice cut through his excuses like a blade. "Funny? There's nothing funny about hurting innocent people. There's nothing funny about picking on someone because they're different. And there's definitely nothing funny about destroying someone's independence for your own twisted amusement." The crowd was growing larger as word of the confrontation spread. Office workers on their lunch break, shoppers, and passers-by were all drawn to the drama unfolding on the sidewalk. Many were recording with their phones, but others were simply watching in fascination as two of Hollywood's biggest stars delivered a lesson in basic human decency. Maya, now standing with support from several kind strangers, found her voice. Despite her tears and obvious pain, her words carried a strength that surprised everyone, including herself. "You don't know me," she said, looking directly at her attacker. "You don't know that I was a dancer before my accident. You don't know that I'm studying to be a teacher, so I can help other kids who are different. You don't know that I volunteer at a children's hospital every weekend, reading stories to kids who are fighting for their lives." Her voice grew stronger with each word. "You saw my crutch and decided I was less than human. You saw my disability and thought that gave you the right to hurt me. But you were wrong. I'm not less than you, I'm better than you. Because I would never hurt someone just because I could." The crowd erupted in applause, their admiration for Maya's courage evident in their voices and expressions. Several people were openly crying, moved by her dignity in the face of such cruelty. The drunk man looked around desperately, seeking any escape from the situation he had created. But there was nowhere to run, no way to undo what he had done. The video of his attack on Maya would be online within minutes, seen by millions of people around the world. His face would be associated with cowardice and cruelty for the rest of his life. "What do you want from me?" he asked weakly, all fight gone out of him. The Rock's grip loosened slightly, but he didn't let go. "First, you're going to sincerely apologize to Maya for what you did. Not because you're sorry you got caught, but because you understand that what you did was wrong. Second," John Cena continued, "you're going to pay for a new crutch and for any medical expenses related to the fall you caused. And you're going to make a donation to a charity that helps people with disabilities." Third, The Rock added, his voice carrying finality, you're going to think about what kind of person you want to be. Because right now, you're the worst kind. The kind who hurts others for fun. The man nodded weakly, his earlier arrogance completely shattered. Okay, he whispered. Okay, I'll do whatever you want. But Maya stepped forward, supported by her new friends in the crowd. I don't want his apology, she said firmly. He's not sorry for what he did. He's sorry he got caught. An apology from someone like him doesn't mean anything. The crowd murmured their agreement, impressed by Maya's wisdom and strength. She was right. A forced apology from a coward was worthless. But I do want him to remember this day, Maya continued. I want him to remember that actions have consequences. I want him to remember that there are good people in the world who won't let bullies get away with hurting others. As sirens could be heard approaching in the distance, someone had called the police. Maya looked up at The Rock and John Cena with gratitude shining in her eyes. Thank you, she said simply. Thank you for showing me that there are still heroes in the world. The police arrived to find a scene unlike anything they had encountered before. Two A-list celebrities acting as witnesses to an assault, a crowd of nearly 50 people all eager to testify, and hours of video evidence documenting every moment of the confrontation. Officer Maria Santos, a veteran of the LAPD, took one look at the situation and called for backup. The drunk man, whose name was later revealed to be Derek Matthews, a 42-year-old unemployed construction worker with a history of public intoxication arrests, was taken into custody without further incident. The combination of alcohol wearing off and the reality of his situation had left him completely subdued. Dr. Peterson conducted an impromptu examination of Maya's injuries right there on the sidewalk, surrounded by the concerned crowd. His diagnosis was both alarming and infuriating. The fall had aggravated her existing knee injury and caused bruising along her hip and shoulder. What could have been a simple trip to the medical supply store had turned into weeks of additional recovery time. She needs to get to a hospital for x-rays, Dr. Peterson announced to the gathered officers. The impact could have caused microfractures or ligament damage that won't show up immediately. John Cena immediately stepped forward. I'll pay for all her medical expenses, he said without hesitation. Transportation, treatment, everything. We both will, The Rock added, his voice still tight with anger. And we're going to make sure she gets the best care available. Maya, overwhelmed by the kindness of strangers and the surreal nature of her situation, could only nod her thanks. One moment she had been an ordinary teenager trying to run an errand, and now she was surrounded by celebrities, doctors, and police officers, all focused on helping her heal from an unprovoked attack. The crowd began to disperse slowly, but not before dozens of people approached Maya to offer their support. Business cards were pressed into her hands, lawyers offering free representation, doctors volunteering their services, and ordinary citizens sharing their contact information in case she needed anything at all. A teenage boy about her own age stepped forward shyly. I just wanted to say you're incredible, he said, his voice barely audible above the noise. The way you stood up to him, even after he hurt you, you're like a superhero. Maya smiled through her tears. I'm not a superhero, she said. I'm just someone who refuses to let bullies win. Officer Santos approached The Rock and John Cena as her partner finished taking Derek Matthews away. We're going to need statements from both of you, she said professionally, though her tone carried unmistakable admiration. What you did here today, it matters. Too often, people just walk away from situations like this. We couldn't walk away, John said simply. When you see someone being hurt like that, you don't get to choose whether or not to get involved. You just do what's right. The Rock nodded his agreement. Maya showed more courage in 5 minutes than most people show in a lifetime. We just backed her up. As the ambulance arrived to transport Maya to the hospital, she insisted on speaking with her unlikely defenders one more time. Sitting on the stretcher, her remaining crutch beside her and her spirits lifted by the outpouring of support, she looked up at the two men who had changed the trajectory of her day, and possibly her life. I need to ask you something, she said, her voice stronger now. Why did you help me? You could have just kept walking. Nobody would have blamed you for not getting involved. The Rock knelt down beside the stretcher, so he was at eye level with her. When I was growing up, I was different too. Not physically, but economically and socially. I knew what it felt like to be picked on, to be seen as less than other people. And I promised myself that if I ever had the power to stop that from happening to someone else, I would. John Cena took her hand gently. And because that's what heroes do, he said with a smile. Real heroes don't just fight fake battles in movies or wrestling rings. Real heroes stand up for people who need standing up for. Maya's eyes filled with tears again, but these were different tears. Tears of gratitude and hope rather than pain and humiliation. You've given me something I didn't know I needed, she said softly. What's that? John asked. Faith in people again. Faith that the world isn't just full of Derek Matthews types. Faith that there are still good people who care about doing the right thing. As the ambulance pulled away, The Rock and John Cena stood on the sidewalk, watching it disappear into traffic. The crowd had finally dispersed completely, leaving behind only the broken pieces of Maya's crutch and the memory of an extraordinary afternoon. Think she'll be okay? John asked, picking up the pieces of the destroyed mobility aid. She'll be more than okay, The Rock replied with certainty. Did you see the way she handled herself? That kid's got more strength than both of us put together. Within hours, video of the confrontation was spreading across social media platforms, faster than either celebrity's publicists could track. The hashtag #MayaStrong began trending worldwide, with millions of people sharing their own stories of overcoming adversity and standing up to bullies. Derek Matthews found himself the subject of international condemnation, his assault on a disabled teenager viewed by audiences around the globe. He was ultimately charged with assault, battery, and disability-based harassment, receiving a sentence that included jail time, community service at a disabilities advocacy organization, and mandatory anger management counseling. But the real story wasn't about Derek Matthews or his punishment. It was about Maya Rodriguez, a teenager who showed the world that true strength isn't about physical power or the ability to hurt others. True strength is about dignity in the face of cruelty, courage in the face of fear, and the refusal to let others define your worth. Maya's story became a symbol of resilience that inspired countless others facing their own challenges. The Rock and John Cena had set out to defend a stranger from a bully, but they had ended up being part of something much larger. A moment that reminded the world that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they walk on crutches, and sometimes they're just decent people who refuse to look the other way when someone needs help. In the end, Maya got her new crutch, her medical expenses covered, and something much more valuable: the knowledge that she was not alone in a world that sometimes seemed designed to tear people down. She had learned that there were still people willing to build others up, to stand between the vulnerable and those who would harm them, and to use their strength in service of justice rather than cruelty. And Derek Matthews? He learned that actions have consequences, and that in a world full of smartphones and social media, moments of cruelty can become permanent reminders of the person you choose to be. His 15 minutes of infamy served as a warning to others. The Maya Rodriguezes of the world have protectors, and those protectors aren't afraid to use their power to ensure that justice is served.